how they handle it ahead of time.
Okay, we'll reconvene our meeting. And we'll move on to information item number 4.5, budget update.
Thank you, President Bacher, members of the board. Dan Troy, Vice Chancellor for Finance, is going to give you both the next two items. It is, frankly, it's relieving to finally be talking about the budget for the coming year slightly after they've approved the one for the current year. In the last few years, as you know, until they got this on-time budget, they used to overlap and make Dan's life even more a nightmare than it is. But Dan, as I mentioned earlier, and his team did a fabulous job in this year's budget, and he's going to give you a quick update on that, and then he'll go right into the next item, which is the 14-15 budget. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Chancellor Harris, President Baca, members of the board. As Chancellor Harris indicated both just now and earlier this morning, I think it's really a relief to come to you this year with presenting a final budget that does not include the threat of trigger reductions, that is not based on the passage of a ballot initiative, that it does not have reductions in it, and that has not been approved in October. For the third year in a row, we actually have an on-time budget, thanks to Prop 25, and I think also thanks to the passage of Proposition 30, and to an overall an improving economic climate. Most of the items I'll go over today that are in the final budget will probably sound somewhat familiar to you. They're not that different from some of the issues we had talked about during the course of the year. I think after the May revision, probably the biggest decision point between the legislature and the governor was exactly just how good the economy is. As you may or may not remember, when the governor came out with his May revision, he found that the economy was pretty good, but that he actually thought that despite the increase of cash that they were seeing in the 12-13 year, his Department of Finance estimated that the 13-14 year was actually a little bit more negative than they had found in January. Still positive overall, but not quite as good as he had estimated in January. A couple of days after that, the ledge analysts came out with their analysis and found that things were, to their analysis, were much better than the governor had estimated. In fact, over the 3-year period, 11-12, 12-13, and 13-14, the LAO thought that revenues were about $3.3 billion higher than what the governor had estimated, and most of that money would be to the benefit of Prop 98 if it were to play out that way. Naturally, the legislature was very interested in spending as much of that money as they could. The governor stuck to his guns, stuck to his estimate, and I think he did so partly because he's backing his Department of Finance and their estimates, but I think also he's very concerned about getting back into the boom or bust cycle that we have seen in prior budgets that Mac Taylor of the LEO had warned this board about in January when he talked about his 5-year fiscal outlook. So in the interest of getting an on-time budget, that's what the legislature did. They went with the governor's revenues. And again, by and large, it's still very, very good news for the community colleges and for education as a whole. Some of the highlights for education, I'll touch briefly on some of the other areas of the education budget. In K-12, of course, they passed a historic change to the funding formula. The local control funding formula eliminates most of the categorical programs that exist in the K-12 system and replaces them with base grants and additional funding grants based primarily on the concentration of high-need pupils in those districts. It was a very major change. It was the subject of a lot of the debate and discussion throughout the final few weeks of the budget, but the governor ultimately did get about 85 or 90% of what he wanted out of that discussion. So this is a very historic change for K-12. UC and CSU, which is good for us whenever they get increases, that opens that pipeline up of transfers for us. Each received an additional $125 million in new funds this year. So again, hopefully that'll help clear the path for some of our transfer students. So we are definitely all of our ships are aligned. The rising tide helps all boats there. Specifically in regard to the community colleges, as Chancellor Harris indicated earlier this morning, This is a budget that is really very, very well aligned with the priorities of the board. We asked for a budget that was a balanced approach that would restore student access, that would support student success, and that would at least fund this year's cost of living adjustment. And I think the budget does all three. In terms of COLA, we were funded for this year's estimated COLA, which is 1.57%. We receive about $89 million in funding to restore access. We think that'll restore about 40,000 students to our rolls, which after years of major decreases is certainly a very welcome proposal. And we also receive significant funds to restore some of our categorical programs. I think most significantly for the interest of student success and this board's actions over the past couple of years, there's $50 million was put into the Student Success and Support Program, which was formerly known as the Matriculation Program. And in terms of the budget, I think that is really the keystone to the Student Success Task Force agenda. So we were thrilled that the governor and the legislature were aligned with our priorities in that regard. In addition to that, there's some restoration of funding for some other important categorical programs that also support student success. $15 million for DSPS, $15 million for EOPS, $8 million for CalWorks. And in comparison, the numbers may seem small, but a $150,000 increase for the Academic Senate to support their work we thought was a very significant move as well. As you look down the list of items I've got here, it may seem like a laundry list, and I'm glad it's a laundry list of increases rather than cuts. One of the most significant budget actions, of course, was the $25 million we received for adult education local planning grants. And the idea here is that that K-12 agencies and community college districts will form a consortium to assess the need for and come up with a plan for addressing the adult education needs of their region. These planning grants are intended to take place over 2 years, and at least under the governor's idea, that there would be $500 million appropriated annually as of the 15-16 year for these consortiums to qualify for, so they could provide adult education services in a uniform funding rate in a cohesive manner for their local regions. Now, the legislature has clearly bought up on some of that idea by approving the planning grants. They clearly support more collaboration between K-12 and community college districts, and are looking at opening up areas of access that have been denied funding through a frozen K-12 adult education formula to regions that have been underserved for years. But they've been somewhat silent on what the world looks like down the road in 15-16. So there were a couple of bills working their way through the legislature that deal with adult education reform. Two of them, I believe, authored by Senator Carol Liu. So I think it's possible that one or two of those bills could emerge as the framework for an agreement of what that world looks like a couple years down the road. We've received $47 million in Prop $39 that go toward energy efficiency activities. We'll have to work with the CEC on developing guidelines for how those dollars can be allocated to districts and for what purpose. We're anticipating that a chunk of that will go toward workforce development, and the bulk of it will go toward project-related funds. As discussed early in the year, the governor's $16.9 million online education initiative was approved by the legislature, so I won't dwell on that as we've talked about it in the past. The governor continues to pay down the deferrals. I'll just point out this number. Prior to Prop 30, our total system-wide year-over-year deferrals totaled $961 million. As of this approved budget, we're down to $592 million. It's a huge change in a rather short amount of time, and I think a welcome change for our districts in terms of their need to borrow money and the cash management juggling they have to do. We received $30 million in deferred maintenance and instructional equipment. I think the last major item I'll reference is that they established priority enrollment for CalWorks recipients. And part of the logic in that is that in the previous budget, they had set, I think, a 24-month clock on your time frame in CalWorks to be on there, so giving them priority enrollment they thought made sense in terms of the budget so they can get trained and hopefully get out in the workforce. So in quick conclusion is that, again, this is a budget that is very well aligned, I think, with the board's priorities. We're pleased to see that. We're pleased to see that an improving economy and Prop 30 is allowing us to reinvest in education rather than all the reductions we've had to suffer through in previous years. And we're hopeful as we look out over the next few years that we can continue that process of a balanced approach of restoring access, supporting student success, and hopefully increasing the dollars per student that were received, as that has taken such a hit through the lack of cost of living adjustments over the prior years. There are some areas of caution I think I should point out, and I guess that's maybe out of habit. Delivering bad news, so I need to do some of that. But I think it should be made clear to districts and to the board that the Prop 30 revenues are temporary. As of the 16-17 year, we'll begin to see a diminution in those funds. The sales tax will end at the end of 2016, and the increased income taxes will end at the end of 2018. So relatively good times are rolling now, but in order to keep them going, we're going to need to see a pretty rapid recovery in the economy down the road. So I think as districts put together their budgets, they need to think about that. Are they putting them together in a way that's adaptive to bad times or times that are not as good as they are today, hopefully. Some other issues are, there's a little bit of confusion, I think, in the field as to what Proposition 30 does and doesn't do. The 12-13 budget has about a little over $800 million in funds from the Education Protection Account, which is the account created for the Prop 30 revenues. And there's a lot of people in the field who think that that's $800 million in new dollars all of a sudden, and that's really not how it works. In fact, much of the dollars in that is simply replacing general fund that otherwise our budgets would have received, so that protects other sides of the budget. So really, the only new dollars we received in 12-13 were $50 million for increased access and about $160 million in a deferral by debt. So there's not 800, it's incorrect to say that there's 800 million in new dollars out there. I just want to make that clear. The other piece to keep an eye on is that in prior years, most of our budget apportionment, about 60% or so, was made up of general fund that was solid, was appropriated in the budget. We knew it was there. It was pretty clear that we can rely on it, and the rest of it was made up of property taxes and fees. So we always lived with some uncertainty on that side of the budget, whether those estimates would pan out as estimated at the final Budget Act. In recent years, we've seen RDA, the dissolution of RDAs used to prop up our apportionment. We've seen the EPA used to prop up our apportionment. So now we see a shrinking percentage of our apportionment is based on the general fund. That means we have 60% or so of our apportionment is now reversed. It's based on estimates in the budget that may or may not be solid. And even if we get a backfill, it's not always clear to districts when they're going to receive those dollars. So there's, again, continued cash juggling on the part of districts with their apportionment. And this is becoming, I think, an increasing problem to manage. And I think it argues very strongly for the need for a continuous apportionment for our districts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next item. But by and large, I think this is a very positive budget. And I think with the Prop 30 in place, with the I think we can expect to see continual increases over the next couple of years. And maybe we can hope that the LEO's estimates of revenues were closer to accurate than the governor's were, and there may even be some potential for some one-time spending as the year goes on. And with that, I'd close my presentation and answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Vice President Bong?
One thing that struck me too that you said was what was on my mind too. It's a good year this year, and I'm concerned about local districts then budgeting accordingly and spending all the extra money without shoring up deficiencies. Will you be monitoring local district budgets in a way and providing guidance throughout the system? Because I see 2016 is not very far away. And I could see if Prop 30 sunsets, we all of a sudden have a sharp drop in state funding across the system.
Yeah, that's certainly very possible. I mean, I'm certainly not going to suggest I know what the economy will look like in 2016 or thereabout. The LEO and finance can't even agree on the 11-12 numbers, and that's 2 years old. But I think it's very important that we communicate to districts that these dollars are time limited, and that no matter how good the economy is, we're going to be receiving less dollars than we would have otherwise with Proposition 30 fully in effect. Now, the other possibility, of course, is that Prop 30 revenues will be continued through another ballot initiative or legislative action. But until that time, we know the sales tax
Sure,
ends partway through the 16-17 year.
Treating Prop 30 as a fixed grant probably is not the idea. It's just simply to deal with the recession as it was, with the idea that you would develop the economy, or the economy would grow sufficiently enough to overcome the dependency on that. Go ahead, Chancellor.
You know, the other thing I want to respond to in Vice President Baum's question about the ability of our office to oversee the finances of individual districts. The truth is we are not adequately staffed to do that. And in fact, part of what we're seeing in the Accrediting Commission and their intrusion into colleges and requiring very specific financial information from them is frankly because we have been unable to do that. And we've made that case with Dan and Eric and I and others in the governor's office and told them, you got a $5.5 billion investment in California community colleges, and you're not staffing the chancellor's office in order to oversee that investment. So the answer to your question is we are not adequately staffed to do what we ought to be doing to monitor much more carefully the finances of individual colleges. And unfortunately, we are too often only involved when those institutions are in real trouble.
Concur. One other note I would add to that is that while we're very supportive of many of the initiatives that were approved in the budget, from the online education initiative to the adult ed program, we think these are initiatives that are going to be very good for the state, very good for students. We were not given any additional positions to manage these activities, so it is going to become a tight squeeze in our office if that problem is not remedied over the next couple of months.
Okay. There being anything else, did you want to move on to another item?
I can move on to the next item if you'd like. So I'm presuming that we also want to be funded in the 2014-15 year. And to do that, we do have a process in place designed to provide a request to the Department of Finance. This board will approve a budget system request at the September meeting that lays out our funding priorities for the subsequent fiscal year. And to that end, our office does convene a budget work group consisting of many system stakeholders. That group met about a month ago to begin the discussions over what are some of our priorities for the 14-15 year, what are some of our strategies in terms of making that request. We had that discussion. We also brought the wisdom of that group to the Consultation Council in June and had further discussions there. And so now I'd like to present some of that information to you and solicit your feedback so that we can come back with a request in September that meets your priorities. So I think, as I mentioned during the discussion of the 13-14 budget, there continues to be a push to have a very balanced approach to our request. We certainly want to continue to ask for restoration of access. We certainly want to continue to support student success and ask for some restoration of categorical programs. One item that we've not requested in the past and is more of a funding guarantee is to have the governor support a continuous appropriation for our system for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Too much of our apportionment at this point is based on estimates, which may or may not pan out at the end of the year. We have guarantees of a backfill for some of those, the RDA and the EPA, but those the amount of the backfill is subject to the determination of the Department of Finance, and the dollars may not come in a manner that's very timely for districts as they close out their budget. So it's certainly my view that with the continuous appropriation, it's the state and the general fund that would be taking on the risk of their estimates rather than our colleges. So I think that's a more appropriate place to put the risk. If indeed those dollars do come in at some point, the state can count those dollars against a future budget. But I think it's only fair that at the end of a fiscal year, that colleges receive the dollars that they expected to receive throughout the year. So I think that's a major push that our system will be taking on over the next year. In terms of a COLA, as I mentioned earlier, we did receive a cost of living adjustment for the 13-14 fiscal year, but we should remember that we did not receive a COLA at all since the 2007-8 year through the 12-13 year. That resulted in about a 16% loss of purchasing power on the part of districts. So I think it should be a priority to not only request to receive a COLA for 14-15, but to get a super COLA, if you will, to make some headway toward restoring some of the lost purchasing power that we've suffered over the recent years. We note that the K-12 system has what they call a deficit factor, which tracks how much they've lost relative to the COLA over time. So there's an expectation that that will eventually be made whole and paid up. We don't have that tracking in our system as neatly. So I think we have to go ahead and be very vocal about making the case for it. So I think that's an important priority for us. As I mentioned earlier, continuing to restore access is key to our system. We'll continue to do that. Some of the other items mentioned by the participants in the work group include professional development for both faculty and staff, instructional and library equipment, deferred maintenance. We did get a little bit of money in deferred maintenance for the 13-14 year, but there's no guarantee that those dollars will continue in future years. Very important items, and we want to see if we can't get back to the place of making them regular items in the budget. And of course, many categoricals were mentioned as worthy of support. EOPS, DSPS, the CARE program, funding for the Student Senate and Academic Senate, and many of the part-time faculty programs, such as the office hours and health insurance programs were mentioned. The fund for student success, and as we've done annually as well, funding support for the Student Senate, which right now comes out of our Chancellor's office budget. So those are items that we will that were supported in the work group. Of course, we would continue to ask for more support for the Student Success and Support Program as well. And given that we saw a $50 million augmentation this year, we think that's probably a priority we share with the governor and the legislature. The work group also talked about some strategic points. How do we shape the request? One of the issues I brought up with is that if we ask, it's one thing to ask for a little bit more money than you think you might get, as the Prop 98 guarantee might bring. But if you go a little bit too far overboard, if you're asking for 2, 3, 4 times as much as you're likely to get, I think we're failing to really communicate what our real priorities are. So I think it's important to have our total request be somewhat tethered to reality. I think that's a much better statement of what our priorities are given available resources. So that's one area I'd like to focus on. Another thing is that I think we should be wary of what the governor's priorities are. So we've certainly seen that he's amenable to cost of living increases, funding access, and funding student success. But if we look at what he's done in the K-12 world, he's eliminated many, many categorical programs. So I think we have to couch our arguments very carefully as we move forward. Again, I would not use that as a reason to not request support for categorical programs, but I think we need to be pretty clear in articulating the reasons why we think funding categorical programs make sense. The group overall was very focused on quality of instruction, quality of the educational that our students receive, and not just the quantity. So certainly restoring access is important, but we don't want to restore seats at a low level of funding. We want to be able to restore students and have them receive a qualitative educational program, and that means a super COLA, that means funding the student success program, and other items. But again, I think we really do want to focus on the quality of instruction. We've seen too much of a diminution of that with the foregone COLAs and the categorical program cuts over the past 6 years. And so again, the next steps is that after receiving the board's input today, we would reconvene the work group for another meeting, try to come down to hammer out something very clear to close to a final proposal, discuss that with the consultation council. Once again, I believe their next meeting is in August, and then hopefully bring a package that the board will support in September. And so with that, I'd close my presentation and solicit your input.
Very good. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Troy. Before we have a discussion, we have one public comment, so if we could go with that, and then we'll,
Sure. Richard Hansen from the Community College Independence.
Is it working now?
Yeah, I think so.
Hi, Rich Hansen, back again from the California Community College Independence. Good afternoon. We're back on schedule, if not a little ahead. That's great. Dan knows what I'm going to talk about here. I really appreciate working with Dan and working in the task group on planning the new budget. I think I was one who was on the call and talked about the quality issue. Things are changing. I think you mentioned it in the prior discussion. Growth and access. We're entering a new era. Last 20 years, it's been all about growth and the tidal wave too, but that tidal wave is now past behind us. And so things will be changing. So quality really is where we ought to be looking. Student success effort is a primary place to be, I think, putting that quality emphasis. I'm hoping as we move into this new era, though, that we also address, and I do believe the new era will be increased funding, economy revives. I think that's the big question, Prop 30 or not. I think we're going to see some better times. As that happens, I would hope the board would share in the faculty priorities. We have a 75% goal, that is that 75% of the instruction would be taught in classrooms with full-time faculty. And right now, we're all over the map in the system. We have in place an FON, or faculty obligation number, that kind of holds us steady. As money becomes available, I would hope that we'd be able to find some mechanism, because there isn't one now for making progress. There used to be one, it was called program improvement. That's long gone. We're in a totally different funding model at this point. So put our heads together and find out how to do that. Some districts are close to 75% or at 75%. Others are below 50%. That's hugely inequitable. And the other issue, I think, in terms of quality is our part-time faculty. Part-time faculty in the state are compensated all over the map. Some districts are very good about compensating part-time faculty for what they do. Others are not. And we need to make headway on something that's probably a little vague to the board at this point. It's been so long, but parity and getting additional money on the part-time salary schedules, essentially to pay them for the work that they do. They don't do all of the work of full-time faculty, but they do teach in the classes, they assess the students, do the prep work, write letters of recommendation, and hold office hours. That needs to, and that was mentioned, I thank Dan for bringing that up. We need to fund the office hours again and better. The other issue is medical benefits. A lot of our faculty struggle to keep their families together. So that's another side of the faculty issues that are part of the quality issue. And finally, on the student success initiative, we need counselors. We need actual people to counsel our students. It can't all be done by computer. Thank you very much.
thank you. Discussion, members? Yes, sir.
So there's a lot here to chew on, and I really appreciate the thought that you bring to help us chew on it.
Thank you.
I wanted to focus on this library equipment and deferred maintenance category. A couple of years ago, when I first joined the board, I was finding myself being confused in relationship to the 75% rule that was just referenced, in terms of where libraries sit with that. Because what we know is that more and more libraries are becoming places where learning is actually happening, and I don't know how we calculate or account for that. But I do think that it has some impact on the way that we think about that 75% formula. I'm not sure which direction these institutions cut, but what I want to know is, what is the scale of the need that we would look to fill in this bullet point that you list on our materials? And how much of that is backward-looking in terms of filling in, unmet budgetary needs versus forward-looking, which would kind of help us think about what is the role of the library as a central part of the educational process in our system? And that's probably a bigger question than we have time to address here, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot and worrying a little bit about, because I do think that obviously there's a lot of capital invested in these facilities. They are, on the other hand, becoming places where we are, through technology and through allied service offerings, we're doing learning and teaching in these facilities increasingly. So I think that, as we think about budgeting for that and resourcing, it's important not just to kind of have a static sense of what the library has been in our kind of 20th century experience. It's really about, like, what is the library in the learning process in the 21st century, and how does that affect our thinking about investing in these facilities? Not just on a one-shot or a retrospective perspective, but going forward, thinking about their utility in the future that we're entering. So again, maybe this is a conversation that this is not the right place to have, but that's something that I think is an important consideration for us going forward. And I don't know what the right vehicle would be for having that conversation, but I would encourage us to be thinking about that. So I guess my more simple to answer question right now is, what's the scale of what you're looking for here? And if you can extrapolate from my question and talk about what does it mean for us going forward in relationship to this kind of investment in the system, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Member Ramos. We did not assign a particular number to it during the work group. It was mentioned as a priority. I think the last time it was funded as an ongoing item in the budget, and I want to say, it could be a year or so off here, but I think it was the 07-08 year, and I think it was down to about $27 million at that point. And I think in previous budgets it had been significantly higher than that. In terms of deferred maintenance, I think I know that through our work with the 5-year capital outlay plan, which Assistant Vice Chancellor Harris talked about earlier today, I think we know that there's well over $1 billion in need for deferred maintenance. That's a simple backlog of the years of lack of funding and neglect, if you will, for those items. But I certainly hear what you're saying in terms of the importance of library equipment, and we could certainly work to make that a priority. I think one thing we might want to strategize about a bit as we develop that request is that this is tends to be a very promising area for one-time dollars as well, which I think there's a reasonably good chance we'll see some one-time money over the next year or so. So we could balance the request between ongoing and one-time as we look ahead for that.
Member Hawkins?
Thank you, President Baca. I'm pleased to see the professional development on here, given the work that LeBaron's task force has done. I'm eager to see their result, but also that we're going to at least request that that be funded, which hasn't been for a long, long time.
Agreed. Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor Troy, for that
Thank you.
Insightful presentation. We will now move on to board reports, and Member Ramos, will begin with you.
I have a new job. I want to announce that I will be the new president and CEO of the Insight Center for Community Economic Development in Oakland, California. I'm happy to be back up north, closer to Sacramento. Thank you. And it's a venerable organization, nearly 50 years old, founded by the Ford Foundation, my former employer, and it helps low-income communities of color to gain access to economic opportunity nationally. So there's a lot of workforce overlay with respect to much of the work that we do here in the system, and I hope there will be opportunities for us to partner in that connection. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. That's my biggest headline.
Okay, that's a big one. Member Sumi?
I gave the keynote speech at the Chief Business Officers Convention or Association meeting a couple months ago, and that was an extremely fruitful conversation. Also to Member Reed and I, as I mentioned, attended the Board of Directors meeting for the foundation, and I just wanted to especially compliment Chancellor Harris for coming over to the board meeting and to spend as much time as he did. I think he spent about an hour talking with the members of our board, which I thought was, extremely helpful for our board, but also, to give up that time to do that, I thought was, extremely good of you, Chancellor, so thank you very much.
Member Hawkins?
No report.
Member Belanza?
In May, I had the opportunity of attending the Ensuring Transfer Success workshop that's done in the North and the South. And is it sponsored or co-sponsored by the State Chancellor's Office? Co-sponsored. Really great opportunity once a year at least to find out what's going on with the UC schools and students transferring from the community colleges, so as to make sure students get correct information. I'll be attending the Curriculum Institute this week. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and pleased to see that there'll be a number of people from the State Chancellor's Office going to make presentations. I have the good fortune of being able to attend the budget workshop that'll be at Sierra College at the beginning of August, and again, I think that's co-sponsored by the State Chancellor's Office. And I'm looking for a presentation that's going to be made in mid-August or so on a district flex day at the Peralta Community College District, because I'm told that Chancellor Bryce Harris will be joining us.
They just wind me up and send me out the door.
My time is spent reporting out to Bobby McDonald as to the works of the of this board. That's my report.
He's still on the board, is he?
Yeah.
Sort
In
of,
spirit.
kind of in spirit or something. Vice President Baum?
A month ago today, I was able to work in my other capacity on helping support a meeting between President Obama and President Xi of China. But in the course of that, Governor Brown was in attendance for several of the events, and he was working actively to continue the relationship with the leadership of the nation of China and building economic partnerships across the greater Pacific. And to that extent, I was able to participate in a dinner that included a conversation with the equivalent of the Secretary of Commerce of China, and talk about education and the interest of American students and California's students in learning more about the Chinese economy and how we are all connected globally in our economic growth and development. So, but the governor was unstoppable in his efforts also to advocate for economic growth that also takes into account the critical elements of climate change and sustainability. And he has a climate change initiative that he had translated into Mandarin that he was giving to everybody, that he's going to continue to advocate. So I hope to see more along those lines. The other thing, and I know President Baca will also say something, at that same weekend was the tragic shooting on the campus of Santa Monica College. And the tragic murder of a member of that community by the gunman, and it was shocking to all of us within the system and those of us who are connected to local colleges to understand that as much as you want your district to be a sanctuary, you're also so much exposed to some of the terrible evil things and people that are out there, and so my heart was breaking that day as well, and I just wanted to say something in remembrance of the trauma suffered by our brothers and sisters at Santa Monica.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to some of the comments I made this morning that I did, and I may have mentioned that I did meet with Congressman Raul Reese, who represents the Palm Springs area, and talking about specifically veterans issues, and indicated to him that that he is a member of the, certainly a member of Congress, but a member of the Veterans Committee, be very much welcome at our upcoming December summit. He is in the process of doing some work with Mount San Jacinto and College of the Desert and other agencies in the area that provide veteran support to bring those organizations more closely and cohesively together to address the issues of veterans, at least in his congressional area. But he was very happy to be able to support our efforts as well statewide. And yes, on the Santa Monica, I certainly would like to express sympathy and thoughts with the Santa Monica community for the tragedy that occurred there, and know that our thoughts and prayers continue to be with them. And also would like to acknowledge, law enforcement and first responders, because when they're out there, they're without them being there, it could have been a much worse tragedy, certainly. So my acknowledgments to them in particular. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. If I could have those of you that are present here, that we are not, in fact, adjourning or ending the meeting, but we will go into closed session tomorrow at 10:30 at the Sterling Hotel, for those that are interested. There will be no report out after that meeting.
But you know what, I'm so happy and thrilled that you're.